opposing the notion that the narrative of motherhood is a fulfilling experience. And what do we mean by this? So let's first explain some of the terms that we're using. When we say motherhood, we include both stay-at-home mothers and working mothers. I think anything else is pretty much clear. When we talk about the idea of what is fulfilling, we think something that is important and satisfactory. So what you hold to yourself as some important value, and also what you think as an outcome is satisfactory to you and that you do not regret. And so let's dig into it. So from the bat, we know that we are supported on the notion of biology first. Sit down. We know that human mothers spend much more energy, even before birth, just making eggs, and then raising offspring themselves like this, and also in terms of nurturing. We know that this is, when we look in terms of what is what outcome is of this, we know that we have biologically hormones involved, like those of serotonin, as such, that do provide, in a sense, a pleasurable experience. And we also know that the emotion of empathy is tied in towards children more naturally, and therefore that also meets the idea of what we consider fulfilling. Now, we do need to separate the difference between the role of a mother and a father. We do know that the reason we consider motherhood more, or just fulfilling in general, is because of the idea of nurturing and comfort that it brings to the table. So that's one side. And so when you consider outcomes, we know that in terms of importance, you are, as one could see, that you are raising the future generation. Therefore, you are imparting ideas and ideologies. And this, in a sense, you are benefiting society, which I'll come on to later. And this also goes into, in a sense, when you've done your job, when you've wanted your child to be who you want, and when those ideas have been passed properly, that is where the idea of satisfactory comes in. And so, therefore, you can, in a sense, feel proud of achievements. And what I consider the outcome of that would be is when those ideas are given to the child, that child can give back to society, that society which raised that mother. So we think that it is not only fulfilling for the mother, but also society. My partner will talk about how the child, in a sense, too, is fulfilled by the experience of motherhood. And so where else can we see such ideas take hold? We know that...
Pointer.
Sure, I'll take your point.
So, for example, would you be okay with, for example, ISIS mothers who would raise terrorist children just to go on and bomb societies? Would you be okay with that as fulfilling experiences?
See, what we do recognize is the different scenarios that do exist with the idea of motherhood. Of course, in cases where such conditions are very terrible and forced upon, we still believe that there have been that even though it is very in a sense unpleasurable to do something as such as you mentioned in ISIS, we still think that an overall role of fulfilling could be done, because let's face it, it's the conditions that you're set within and the improvements that come out of that. We think that's the essential to what we consider a fulfilling experience for in motherhood. So, moving back to my other point, which is that motherhood provides freedom. And freedom for who? Well, it provides freedom for the mother and the child to, in a sense, they are recognized by in those places where you aren't being forced to down. The freedom of that society gives to you because you have done the role of continuing your lineage, and therefore you are, in a sense...
Point, please.
No. In a sense, just fulfilling their needs. So what have I told you? I've defined for you what motherhood is. I've told you the different types. I've told you why, in a sense, when it works, why this is biologically irrelevant and why that works to our side. We've told you why when it's important and satisfactory for the mother and society, and my partner will come on to talk about why the case is also as such for children. Thank you. And that's why we are proud to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your time. So now I'd like to just address some of the things that have been brought up by a side proposition and show you how these are false negative before I continue on to my own points. So one of the things it says is that women are expending too much energy making eggs or nurturing the future generation. Well, the truth is women do not expend as much energy as men. In fact, men expend so much energy, there's so much heat generated that the organs can't even be kept within the body. The point is that women are actually exceeding men in every single basically university. They outnumber men by a lot. Women are the ones who are getting the education, the jobs in the future. They all belong to the women. In general, there's like, even in Qatar University, it's like, 16,000 women to like 3,000 men. And it's like that, just not in Qatar, but in many other countries. And it isn't restricted to, certain fields, but it's, like across the board in general. Unless you can, find some exception in some one country, which doesn't really apply to the whole world, to the world as a whole. The point is that this is a false narrative. The reason why it is a false narrative is because it will cause feelings of distress, okay? It will cause feelings of, like a lot of negative feelings. It will cause a feeling of underachievement when it is not achieved. Whereas these women might actually have achieved a lot in their lives, okay? And they might have, a good education, they might have a good career, they might have papers, research papers in their name, they might have inventions and patents, they might be, in a big company, in a leading position. There could be so many things that they have achieved. Rather than being mothers themselves, they could have raised, for example, their sisters' kids. And here I want to bring in another thing about this, that this raising children, it's for men as well. Why not, Why can't you be a stay-at-home dad? If your wife has a better salary, you guys have kids, one of you needs to stay home to look after them, for example. Then if your wife is earning like 10 times as much as you are, then why shouldn't you be the one who gives up your job instead of her? Why is this her role? So what happens with this narrative, this really harmful narrative that the government has been promoting and proposing, is that there's workplace discrimination, okay, against women. There's educational discrimination against women. Women are not hired or passed over for promotion because there is a view, because of this narrative, that what's going to happen? What's going to happen in the future? This woman's going to have a kid and she's going to quit the job to go look after that baby. Okay, but why? Why should we have this narrative? And even like in education, first from the beginning, from childhood, what happens is boys are given toys such as, fireman, scientist, engineer, builder, something like that. And what do women get? They get a washing machine, a kitchen set, a fake plastic vacuum cleaner. This is not okay. Okay, this is not okay. But why does this exist? It exists because of the narrative that the government is proposing. If we get rid of this narrative, if we show you that the narrative, that we stop supporting this narrative and we get rid of this narrative completely, we can have some kind of equality. We can have equality in education. We can have equality, again, in jobs. We can have equality everywhere. And I believe that there should be as many stay-at-home dads, and seeing the current trend, maybe more stay-at-home dads than there should be mothers, who are staying at home. And I think it's just as fulfilling to raise, your nephews and nieces and other members of your family as it is your own children, and that you shouldn't discriminate against, the cute 3-year-old son of your sister, for example. Okay, so we've talked about this, that the things that they have provided. Now they say provide freedom. Tell me, like this is what the side government said, that motherhood, it provides freedom. It provides freedom from what? Okay, freedom from who? Who was the one trapping you in something before you had a baby? This is the question. I'd like you to raise a point of information so I can find out, because you haven't said. Recognize, is this the kind of recognition you need? You need the recognition that, oh, look at me, I have this baby. Oh, he's 3 months old now. Is this the recognition you need in your life as a woman? Is this the purpose of a woman's life? Really? Is this what you're going for? What if a woman is infertile or disabled or for some other reason can't have kids? Now she's going to have a horrible life. Why? Because she cannot ever achieve her purpose. She cannot ever achieve fulfillment because of your narrative? Sure.
We're not saying the only way to achieve fulfillment is through motherhood. We're only saying it is one way to do it.
Oh, okay, so it's one way to do it. So why are you promoting it then? And why isn't it for men anymore? See, this is the thing. And many things can give many people fulfillment. But if you say this is for, them and that is for them, and, raising kids and whatever, is like a woman's job, she should wash the dishes or something like that. This is not an okay thing to say. This is actually quite, it's a form of racism. It's actually quite sexist. And, okay. So basically the thing is that what the side opposition is proposing is that we should get rid of this narrative, that this narrative is counterproductive, and that this narrative is causing discrimination in terms of studies. Okay, it's wasting government resources. The government spends a lot of money on public universities, educating women, and does the husband expect that his doctor wife will come at home, hang up her stethoscope, and start making bread? Yeah, and hopes that it'll be round. Is this the narrative? Is this the thing that we want happening in our society? No, we don't. So to save the society, to save the government resources, to end the workforce discrimination, to prevent all of these problems in society, we need this narrative to end. We need a final nail in the coffin of this narrative. And my partner AJ will come and elaborate on many of these points that I've brought up how women are perceived in this way and how this discrimination occurs in the workplace, within their families. And basically, because of this narrative being so wrong, side opposition is proud to oppose. Thank you.
So, first of all, I'd like to just talk about what the opposition said and refute it because of how absurd it sounds. Because what he basically, in a nutshell, what he basically said was, we should not be proud of mothers who care for their children because somehow it's somehow causing discrimination in the workplace, or it's causing discrimination in the household, We should instead demonize mothers who spend their time and energy in caring for their children and nurturing their offspring and promoting the future generation to be responsible and caring adults and members of society. So to begin with, one of the things they said was, men, this absurd notion that men expend more energy somehow in terms of organs. I'm not sure what he said, but which is first of all not true. Biologically, women actually spend more energy in caring for their offspring, which is actually, you can look it up. And mothers also spend more energy in producing their eggs, which is just fact. I'm not sure how you can refute that. So this is kind of, they're not really relevant in this case because he's talking about gender discrimination, but when we should actually focus on the mothers and not the fact that they're women and versus men. This is not a gender issue. This is a mother-children relationship, not a male-girl relationship. So to move on with the points, I'll first of all talk about the benefits of motherhood on the child and in his experience of growing up and becoming a member of society. So first of all, a child without a mother, which is the case that a mother who doesn't care for their child would not be able to instill values and not only that, but also to care for their children, and would not be able to, and the children would, as a result, feel unsafe and would not feel that they have someone to rely on in times of danger. Yeah.
Why can't you say a parent who cares for the child instead of mother?
Okay, yeah. So, well, first of all, what would you say that how would you say that to the millions of single mothers in the United States? The fact is that mothers, as a result of actually producing them physically, have this what's it called, link to them. This is by the fact that mothers inherently have more they're more responsible biologically to their children and offspring, and therefore they have more obligation to care for them, and they also are more biologically more predisposed to being more caring and nurturing, and they also are more able to care for them in terms of feeding them and being there for them when the father isn't, which is a very, very common case. So I would just like to talk about how the child feels, how the child benefits because of the mother. So a child who grows up with a nurturing mother is able to look for encouragement and feel that they have someone to look after them when they otherwise couldn't. And also, this is also due to the fact that mothers have this capability of caring for their children despite unconditional. This is unconditional love that you can't get elsewhere in society. A child cannot get unconditional love in his workplace. A child cannot get unconditional love with anyone else other than his mother. And this unconditional love is extremely important because unconditional love allows a child to look for, I'll take your point.
So if the mother is in the workforce and she comes back after an exhausted day and the entire day is spent without the mother, where's he going to get some unconditional love from?
He's still going to get it from the mother. This is why it's a fulfilling career, because we are saying it takes a lot of energy. We're not saying it's an easy job. We're saying it's a fulfilling experience because it takes so much of their energy, because it takes so much of their time, and it's actually because it's so important and so energy costly that this should be that also ties into why it's so satisfying when actually it's successful and the child becomes a really, really responsible and caring person. Furthermore,
before you move on, sir.
Yeah, I'll take a point.
What if the child turns out to be horrible? Does that make motherhood unfulfilling?
Well, it depends why it becomes why the child became a horrible person. Did he become a horrible person because of the friends he was around, or was he a horrible person because of some traumatic experience? If it was a horrible person because of the mother herself, due to her bad parenting ability, then yeah, it would be less fulfilling than it would have if she actually raised the child with care and nurturing and encouragement. So this is two things we see. This is nurturing and care that instill the child with self-worth and empathy that you can't get when you're without this unconditional unconditional love and nurturing figure that they cannot find elsewhere in society. This promotes empathy, it promotes openness in the child, and it promotes the child's self-worth in times of desperation, in times of when he's scared, or if he has to let go elsewhere in society, he could find that unconditional treatment from the mother, and this is why this is extremely important in society. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to start by refuting what our lovely opening government have said regarding mothers. Basically, giving that assumption, hey, motherhood is everything. Yes, we should go with that premise that motherhood is the best way for women to go about. Okay, so let's start with this. Here you mentioned by that let's start with saying unconditional love. Yes, I like the point that my partner had just made in his POY, saying that what do you call this? It's like you said that if the child grow up not being having a terrible upbringing, the terrible result of her sacrifices and not sacrifices, still it won't be less fulfilling. But you also said it'd be unconditional love. So why is it a fulfillment then? I didn't understand why would you say that if you're supporting that is unconditional love, but at the same time, if the child doesn't grow up to become a fulfilling person, you would say that, oh, no, you still have the unconditional love. So I think I spotted your contradiction there. And another thing I want to talk about is saying that we should not focus on gender relationship. I mean, this point of this motion was saying that we should focus on the narrative. So why shouldn't we also focus on the possibilities of explore the possibilities or the results of pulling up this narrative, which is why I'm going to be talking about in the points I'm going to be making. And like my previous speaker said about the workplace discrimination, yes? Now, let's talk about it, like, say that a woman, yes, coming for a job and all that stuff. I'm sure that has to, like, we have definitely people complaining about equality and all that stuff, saying that women should have a better standing in the society. Yeah? Now, if you want to be taking this narrative, won't it be fueling this inequality thing that women aren't capable of working in, having the less standards as compared to men? Because whenever it comes to say an interview, what would they be presuming? They're presuming that the woman could get pregnant and she'll become a liability, and that she will not be able to function in optimum capacity. That will not provide profit for them, which is also which is what inequality. And okay, let me take a point before I move on.
The entire case of opening opposition is they're giving us gender issues and then saying this narrative will cause these gender issues without giving us any real reason. How does simply telling people this is fulfilling automatically mean it is the only form of fulfillment?
Okay, yes. Because when we're talking about this one, yeah, that only form of fulfillment, does it also branding women at like my brother mentioned, women growing up growing up, they should be washing dishes, they should be cleaning dishes, they should be women who are staying at home. Won't they be growing up thinking that I'm being pressured to become a motherhood, to become a mother, which is because it's a fulfilling experience? Won't it also fuel that narrative? Won't it also fuel that when people say that I should grow up and become become a mother for fulfilling experience, when most women they want to explore, they want to become leaders, they want to become that, and when you're saying that they become a motherhood experience, no. When you're saying that it's a fulfilling experience, won't the other parents be drilling women? You should be going. This one's good for you. You're going to feel that it's a very successful and all that stuff. No, thank you. And another thing I want to talk about also here in Qatar. Qatar, we have that if you're not married, you're branded as an old maid. Okay, you're branded as an old maid. We want to say that women shouldn't be branded like that just because she's a stay-at-home mom, she's working and all that stuff. No. We think that it will also be what painting also a bad image also for maids. Yeah, because maids they've raised the children of those people who have maids and all that stuff. They raised their children, they gave them food and all that stuff. It's their fulfilling experience. So shouldn't you also be considering that also as a narrative for what you have to mean also? You also have a fulfilling experiences. So shouldn't you also be addressing that? Another thing also also give another example of in the Arab world when women are branded as she's staying at home. When your father comes home go make them this, or go make this for me. Go and clean this house, go and this thing. And also that whenever the children they're not what they call this, they're doing something, they're crying all over, what they do, they go and send that to the mother, they tell the mother to go and do that, to sort it out, yeah? So how can that be also a fulfilling experience, yeah? So we want to say, and I'll take a point before I move on. You have any other point? So, no, thank you. I don't use time already. So what have me and my partner have mentioned in this debate? We mentioned that this false narrative will lead to what? Out of women, will lead to workplace discrimination. It will lead to what? To women being it will cause a poor narrative for women. It will cause more pressure on them. It will cause for them to have inequality in the workplace. It will cause for what? It will also what? Like also my friend said, it will cause what? For a feeling of underachievement. Okay, she might have done a lot of stuff. Like you also mentioned in your point that she might have worked a lot and she comes back home to her family and all that stuff. She must have achieved a lot of stuff, yeah. But that won't be recognized with this narrative. It won't be recognized. The only thing to recognize her as a mother, but she won't recognize as she helped teach students in school. She helped she helped volunteer in some sort of event. No, that's not going to be addressed. Okay, I take your point.
Why can't motherhood be one of those things?
Why can't motherhood be? Okay. So we're saying that if she achieves a lot of stuff, yeah, if she a lot of stuff, and that it's not chosen, it's not it's chosen above that, and like we said, I've linked upon the possible repercussions of causing a narrative that we will cause this one. So we say that the disadvantages would outweigh the benefits, and which is why we want to say that we have won this debate by showing that workplace discrimination it will be evident through this narrative. We have shown why that the women will feel underachieved. We have shown that also that women also have it will fuel the inequality that women might have in society, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we just saw someone exclaim that there's a straw man in the house and spent the next 7 minutes creating another. So let me tell you the status quo right now, because it seems like we have a lack of clarity of what that looks like, right? I ask you, can you find one culture where an unmarried woman at the age of 70 isn't at some point demonized, called a spinster in Europe, called I don't know, a fruitcake in Japan? I dare you to find one culture where that exists. That is not the status quo. Sure, you might look at Tumblr and say, find people who say, you're so brave for not being a child free at the age of 50. Sure, that is one echo chamber that you have so said that exists. Sure, but it's not the status quo. It's not the predominant narrative, right? Narrative of motherhood, as it stands now, is that nurturing children should be the sole duty of the mother, not the father. And this is problematic for a couple of reasons. They have mentioned it briefly, but have failed to actually analyze it. But that's one problem, right? The other problem is what are the mothers actually asked to give up, right? And what is the extent of this narrative? How pervasive is it? Okay, on the first point, right? How pervasive is this? So women, or rather girls, are asked to look at, I don't know, asked to nurture for dolls before they can actually nurture, human babies. That is still the situation, right? Guys, when they buy baby dolls, aren't looked at as, oh, look, this is a normal thing to do. That's never the case, right? It's always a normal thing for girls to look at those things, and that's part of the problem, right? Men are never asked to be nurturing, women always are, and that's part of the issue. I'll come to that, and all the consequences come from it later. So that's the extent of the problem at a very young age. Later, women are expected to marry at the age of 30. If they don't, they have basically eschewed one of the major societal expectations of them. And if they fail to do so, they are then seen as either too selfish to actually create a family, either too broken to actually become an effective mother, and basically abandon their duties and their obligations to creating the next generation, right? And this is a problem for those who actually do think that they're better off not being mothers because they're unprepared. They rather seek their career, and they rather see the freedom of having their wealth kept to themselves and enjoy it however they wish, right? And enjoy that agency that comes with it. So the problem isn't that we're being far too liberal and ignoring the various importances that come with motherhood. It's rather that, we want to avoid the excesses of this narrative that currently exists. That is the issue at hand, right? Okay, now, I'll take you.
Again, you're taking gender issues and somehow connecting it to the narrative of motherhood. You still
I'll come to
us
that.
why being a girly girl comes from having a narrative of motherhood.
Right, this is rather obvious. I don't think this requires any explanation, really. Okay, so what is motherhood? It's a huge burden on the mother, right? Basically, they're asked to give up their career, their time, and basically give up all their energy to nurture the child. So basically, children who are female are asked to then become these nurturing personalities so that later, when the time comes, once they're mothers, that they're actually able to carry out their duties. That is the situation, right? And that's why, at least in the gender norms that we see now. Explained, all right? So, what are women actually asked to give up? They're asked to give up their agency, right? In any sort of decision making when it comes to marriage or their issues with their family, much of the independence that comes for women comes from the fact that they're able to have an effective source of income, right? And by having motherhood as a way to basically avoid having the sort of income that they have, they're asked to give up a whole lot, right? They're asked to give up their careers, many directions within their lives, and necessarily they have less decision making when it comes to, say, divorce, when it comes to, say, any sort of large decision making when it comes to their family, because they're dependents, right? They're dependent on a different source of income, either from their husband or from their fathers. And as a result, they don't have the sort of independence that comes with it, and therefore they lack freedom, right? And so this is the problem at hand. They're asked to give up their freedom. In return, they're promised fulfillment in the form of motherhood, but as we all know, mothers are stressed when they have children. I think we ignore the fact that, women have to put up with the fact that you have a crying baby for 4 or 5 months. Afterwards, they get kind of sassy, and you have to deal with all the problems that comes with them as teenagers. It's a huge demand, right? And it's a psychological demand. And many women just after birth, they go through depression, right? Why is that? Because they don't think they fulfill their duties, right? That's an enormous expectation that they always fail to meet. And that is a sort of anxiety that we want to avoid in today's society. So, another thing. It's always seen as exclusive to women, right? We think that men should enter into it, and they alluded to it as stay-at-home dad. We think it's much more pervasive than that. Why? And I think they've alluded to it as well. They think that somehow women are unique to this job. Why is it then that children can grow up perfectly fine when they're raised by 2 gay men, right? That is entirely possible, and it's completely ignored. The job of child rearing should be available for whomever wishes and desires to do so. It should be a free-for-all. It shouldn't be exclusive to women, because the women who think they're unprepared for the job shouldn't be expected to do this, and those who are fully willing but are not female can't have access to it. I dare you to find one society where a man who is caring towards children who he's not related to isn't seen as a pedophile, isn't always suspected of having malicious thoughts towards that child, and at least had the police gang up on him at some point in time, right? That always happens. They're always suspected, and because of the suspicion, very few fathers are willing to go through with the many pressures that come with child rearing and being a nurturing figure. And that's why I say, look, in kindergarten, men aren't the dominating force. So what have I told you today? That one, the constraints that come with marriage necessarily limit women's freedom, and that this issue is so pervasive that at a very young age they're already primed towards this task, and as a result they're basically asked to be docile, submissive, and all these the many problems that come with these make them less able to function in a workspace where being more assertive, being more dominating are the various factors that allow you to have success, right? And so because women are primed towards the situation that they can't function in a workspace where they find most fulfillment. Women put off having children until the 30s and 40s in all developed parts of the world, precisely because the only way they can guarantee their freedom is their job, right? And so they'll put it above having children, and that's why they put it off until their 30s and 40s. And as a result, this should basically say that, look, there's a huge demand for having children at a later age. There's a huge demand for work, for women, rather than having family rearing as a primary priority. And population issues, most of those issues can be solved by immigration, right? And so we don't think that that is any reason to promote this narrative for that sole purpose, right? And so we don't buy that whatsoever. And for all the reasons, it's very fast response. Thank you.
As
team opposing government, we think that this is a battle of narratives. I think that this debate has been occurring in an echo chamber where we think that there's only one type of narrative that's being pressed on women in society today. And what we're going to do is to bring you the nuance and show you how this kind of narrative in today's society is urgent and is necessary. That's our first point of extension. We'll be talking about things and clarifying things like what does fulfillment mean and why it's particularly important in the context and how it ensures that women are not afraid to have children and to be mothers, and why this is something that we want them to do on a principle and practical level. We'll also be talking about how this encourages the formation of families and why this is particularly important. So, let's get a few things out of the way in terms of rebuttal. We hear from this side about how women are getting jobs in education and that this is a false narrative and women may have achieved a lot, but they'll think that they're not successful because of this narrative. We think that this is kind of a straw man. We're not telling you that this is the only narrative that exists and that the only way to be fulfilled is to have motherhood. They kind of ignore all our POIs by saying, well, next point. And we think that the point here is we're not telling you this is the only form of narrative. We're telling you that this is a form of narrative that should exist. Why? The first point. We live in a world today, particularly in developed nations, and we'll be talking about developing nations later in the debate, but in developed nations there is a strong narrative, particularly from feminist movements, that's saying that people who have children and who stay at home are seen as inferior and are seen as weak. The optimal woman is someone who goes and works out, who sometimes doesn't even need to get married, who is just having boyfriends every single day. We think this is particularly important, right, in a society where women are discouraged actively to not have children. This has problematic issues on a principle and a practical level. Principally speaking, we have women who want to stay at home, women who want to be mothers, but are discouraged to do so in a society that is increasingly pushing down a narrative that women who do that are inferior, right? By having this narrative there, we are creating a counter pressure. That is all it is. We are not shoving down people's throats what they ought or ought not to do. If a woman wants to work and live her life and never have a family or never have children, fine. But the women who want to do so should not be pressured by a society that is becoming increasingly liberal, who is completely anti-motherhood, and for those reasons, we think that this narrative is important. But on a practical level, it's extremely important for us to ensure in countries such as Europe and Japan, where population issues are increasing, and that there are aging populations and women who are more likely to work because of these narratives, because of the liberalization of these countries, that they do not want to no longer have children and they see motherhood as something that's inferior and weak. For us to have this narrative there, so that the women who want to do so can. This is the main point of this debate. No, what they need to do is to prove to us the harms of this narrative. Simply having this narrative as a counter pressure, where are the harms? They keep saying, creating assumptions, saying that because this narrative exists, women will grow up thinking that they cannot be mothers. This is wrong. We do not live in an echo chamber. There are narratives from all over the world. There are thousands of avenues of persuasion. These people will grow up in societies that empower women in the future, right? And we think that having that, as well as the narrative, that it's okay to be a mother, and it is fulfilling, and it is not inferior or weak, is very good for women who want to do so. It's very good for for solving population-based problems. And that is where team opposition failed to give us any substantive arguments. This idea about why men, why not women, we think that it falls out of the scope of the debate. We'll deal with men differently. But the idea here is, the reason why it's women is because the woman decides if she can have children, right? It's not, if a man decides to have a child, he's not going to be able to do so because of biological reasons, right? We think that the woman has the final say. And if we say, oh, the man needs to choose as well, no, sperm donors, right? Okay? We think still women have the final say no matter what. Straw man, yeah, whatever. Okay, they said that we said motherhood is the best thing. We are not saying that. We are saying that motherhood ought to be something that is seen as fulfilling, not something that is the only form of fulfillment, right? And why it's particularly important in the current narrative that is existing today. The idea that you'll be growing up in societies that force motherhood on you is just not true. Let's look more into this narrative, right? We're talking about how women are growing up increasingly seeing that, for example, pregnancy is... Sure.
Why aren't you looking at countries that have a huge population problem where this narrative is being forced onto people? And why are you talking about countries where, you know, like the population isn't a problem? You have like India, you have...
Okay.
Yeah.
That's because this is where we think the debate is relevant, okay? If you're talking about developing countries, like you're saying, where motherhood is forced upon children, then this is out of the scope of the debate. We are against narratives that say the only form of fulfillment is motherhood, which is what exists in the countries that you have just mentioned, which a lot of your substantive argument is based upon, right? We are only supporting saying that motherhood is fulfilling, not that it is the only form of fulfillment, which is what exists in several countries. Which is why this is how we deal with the developing nations aspect, and why we think it's particularly relevant to developed nations in which this narrative exists.
to answer your question. We think that the women today are seeing pregnancy and having children as more problematic in the sense of being pregnant for 9 months, having less time for work, having to go home. We think that this is the current prevalent narrative. We are fine with this, right? We're fine if a woman decides to do so, but we think that this is becoming problematic for the women who don't want to do so, who, if they choose to go against it, and eventually as this narrative becomes stronger, will be seen as inferior and weak, right? We also think that there's a discouragement of individuals to even have families, right? We think that the formation of a family, I don't need to be tied to a man, I don't need to have a family and so on, is problematic on several levels. Again, on the principal reason, the ones who want to have families are also discouraged because of this narrative, but also on a practical reason, having families and having children is just practically important, right? I don't want to limit women in any form or any kind. We're just saying the women who choose to do so should be allowed to do so, and this narrative allows them to do that, right? Why do we want families and why do we have children? As we've already proven to you, that we think this narrative will help encourage women to have children, to have families. We think that families are particularly stable. We think that families are particularly good for the economy in terms of spending, in terms of education, in terms of stability, for both the family, for both the child, and for both creating a nurturing environment, right? And we think that in cases of having, boyfriend, girlfriend, which is the prevalent occurrence in European and Western liberal countries, we think it's pretty problematic because this is much less stable. You're not tied by the law. There's less exchange of wealth. There's less regulation. We think that marriage is particularly crucial, and telling people that motherhood is fulfilling, and the people who want to be mothers, right, will be able to do so, and will increase the number of families that we have and family units that we have in society, right? Particularly because people would want to be in families and have their children in families for that precise stability, right? And we think that this idea of motherhood and being in a family will particularly increase the prevalence of this. And for those very reasons, we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, so before, just to sum up the debate, so basically our closing government believes that this debate is a narrative versus narrative clash in which both narratives are coexisting. So we're not saying that we'll promote this narrative and say that yes, motherhood is fulfilling in itself, but it's the only fulfilling thing you can do as a woman, and that a woman as a doctor, a woman as an engineer in itself is not fulfilling. So most of the arguments saying that you're forcing women, that motherhood is the only option, that you're forcing them to just stay at home and restricting them, and so you're impeding their ability to be part of the workforce is completely absurd. Because we're saying that, like opening opposition mentioned, they want women to explore options of what they want to do, and we support that. But during that exploration, when you view being a doctor, when you view being an engineer, we also want women to view being a mother as equally fulfilling in their lives, and that's the narrative we're promoting. So this whole rant about, oh, we're forcing women to give up their lives, we're forcing women to stay at home, we're forcing women to not work, is completely absurd and does not hold any relevance. Now, moving on, there are two spheres here in which this emotion is valid. So first, we look at developing nations. In the developing nations, they said that you're forcing women, that motherhood is the only option, you should stay at home, and that people are, like, family societal pressure as well. So we're again saying that motherhood is one of the fulfilling options for women who want to do so. So what we're propagating basically is the freedom of women, the freedom of choice for women without societal pressures. So this is more prevalent in developed nations, where the narrative to which closing opposition completely ignored is that women who have jobs, that women who have a higher socioeconomic standing are viewed as more successful as compared to women who just have children and don't work, and she could have done so much, she could have contributed to society, but she's just sitting at home and not doing anything. That's the narrative that we want to counter. That's not the narrative we want to eradicate. Women working themselves is a fulfilling endeavor in itself, but we also want to, for women who want to stay at home, we won't want them to feel that, I'm going to be a mother, but I'm not doing, no thank you, I'm not doing anything with my life. We want them to feel that they're equally fulfilling, that they're equally contributing to society as a working woman. Another point that they mentioned was about depression, how a woman feels depressed after that I went through all this tedious endeavor of giving birth to a child. But this depression is actually accentuated by the narrative that, I went through all that struggle and society views me as doing nothing with my life, as society views this as a futile endeavor in itself. That's something we believe actually supports us as the narrative that you went through this and you are doing something to contribute to society, you're doing something fulfilling with your life, will actually mitigate that depression in itself.
Moving on, they present, no thank you. Moving on, they presented this narrative that, oh, it's one or the other. You can either be a mother or you can either be a working woman. We actually reject this premise because there are working women. There are women who balance out the whole role of raising their children and raise their children well. We're not saying that they're raising their children, the children have to end up as criminals or something. No, thank you. We're saying that women raise children well and women work simultaneously as well. But the main target, the main people who we are trying to liberate from the societal oppression, from the societal stigma that, oh, women who stay at home and raise children are inferior. That's who we're trying to help. That's the women who actually want to do that. And as Musa, no thank you. As Musa mentioned, that this allows for people to do what they want. It basically promotes the freedom of choice and the freedom of expression in a woman itself without any societal pressure. Moving on, no thank you. Moving on, the whole comparison between fatherhood and motherhood, and why we're discussing motherhood. Well, firstly, because that's the scope of the debate. So fatherhood technically falls out of the scope of the debate itself, but like Musa mentioned, why are mothers the primary stakeholder here? It's because a father who wants to have a child cannot do so without a consenting woman. But a woman who wants to have a child can do so without a without a consenting man through the availability of sperm donors. So we believe that essential the primary decision comes down to the women themselves. I'll take the opening.
Yeah, what about surrogate mothers? Men can of course have children with surrogate women to produce the baby for them. And what about stay-at-home dads? Do they now feel like women according to your narrative?
All right, thank you. No, we're not saying that stay-at-home dads are also wasting their life. This is a completely absurd notion that, okay, so women who work are okay, but stay-at-home dads are wasting their life. It doesn't really make sense. We're saying that people can do what they want to do if a person is a father or a woman, but primarily in this case a woman, because that's the scope of the debate, wants to stay at home. They can, and they can do so without being judged by society, without being viewed as a waste of their potential, without being viewed as an unfulfilling task on their end, which holds no value in their lives. Moving on. So the whole, we pointed out the benefits of this. We pointed out how if women do so, firstly, we're liberating them to do what they want to do without judgment. Secondly, we're promoting the creation of families. And why is that beneficial? Musa pointed out that it promotes economic stability in terms of the spending as compared to people in relationships, the boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It also promotes more of a better opportunity for the child to be raised itself because of the whole notion of family itself, and that is a benefit that we feel that exists for society itself. But moreover, we believe that on the comparative, they absolutely failed to prove to us how this narrative that women who want to, who aren't forced to, but women who want to stay at home and raise children and don't want to work is actually harmful to society. We really don't see how there is any tangible harm, anything, and I encourage the last whip, the closing opposition's whip, to come up with a way in which this actually damages society, because we haven't gotten anything from opposition so far in this regard. So just to sum it up, with the rise of feminism narratives that say that, oh, women are only viewed according to their income and their promotion, their job status and everything, we view this, it's incredibly important in those nations and in developing nations to make motherhood an equally viable and equally fulfilling option to all other career options. And so we're basically giving women the choice, but through this narrative coexisting with the other narrative, we're saying, yes, you can be a doctor if you want to, but yes, if you want to be a mother, that's equally fulfilling and you can do so as well. And to just denounce this argument on the basis, oh, it's principally wrong, we already proved how it's not, and to say that no practical benefit, we also explained how the creation of families and all bring about practical benefits of this as well. That's why we're happy to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very confusing debate. So, first of all, on the opening slide, for example, they were arguing on whether, for example, motherhood is a great way, and if not the only way of getting fulfillment. Then the closing government is saying, no, we don't really want to take opening's case, we want to say it's just one possibility, and they're clearly trying to scroll out this motion by saying, no, we're trying to take this neutral stance, and say, hey, we're just giving a choice to everybody over here, right? So, first of all, in addition to them taking the neutral stance, they're also very hypocritical when they talk about freedom of choice. Why is that so, ladies and gentlemen? Because when you speak of freedom of choice, such a notion only works when you know what you're signing up for. And hopefully what I'll try to prove to you is that there is absolutely nothing about motherhood that begets any fulfillment. So, two main questions that I want to answer over here. First of all, what is it about motherhood that begets fulfillment? And if you follow me through, you'll see the answer is, well, pretty much nothing. And then my second question that I want to answer is, so what exactly would be fulfilling for these women, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, what is it exactly about motherhood that begets fulfillment? So we've heard, like, many possibilities. So, for example, one, is it the pain, for example, they go through during childbirth and pregnancy? Well, that used to be the case, but these days, for example, over 95% of women in Hamid's Women's Hospital ask for an epidural or a C-section just to completely minimize the whole idea of pain during childbirth. We're all in air-conditioned houses these days, which, like, no one has to, go walk out to the desert heat anymore. Something like that. So the other possible thing, which was the majority of what they were trying to say, is, okay, hey, child rearing. Okay, so now I'm going to separate child rearing. So when I say child rearing, we're talking about in the context of a mother. So there can be two types of mothers which are mutually exclusive. One, stay-at-home moms. Two, working moms. Why are they mutually exclusive, ladies and gentlemen? Because you only have 24 hours in a day and you need to sleep for at least like 8 hours a day to be fulfilling. And this time is limited. You can either work or stay at home. You can't really have best of both worlds. So here's the thing. I'll speak about both types of mothers. First of all, when it comes to stay-at-home moms, first of all, stay-at-home moms, yes, on our side, we do concede that stay-at-home moms can do a great job raising children. They could do a great job at, like, furthering the ideology of the children and, or depending on what you want to see, indoctrinate them with whatever beliefs they have. But, however, they must give up a few things should they go down that path. It confines them to the shackles of patriarchy. What does that mean? Well, in two separate instances. One, in the context of the family, and two, in the context of the workforce. First of all, the context of the family. The context of the family, they completely give up agency. Well, let's see what I mean by that. So, if a woman is a stay-at-home mom, there has to be some sort of breadwinner in the family, and that will have to be the other partner. I'm just going to say man, even though I'm open to possibilities of anything. So, if the man is a breadwinner, it's been shown time and time again as a fact that the person who is the main breadwinner in the family, the person who gets the income, he is the person that, or he or she is the person that will make decisions in that family. He's the person that will, like, carry decisions, make decisions, and basically the other party, who is a woman with no income, has very little say. Therefore, these women can't partake in decision-making processes. Therefore, they have no representation in family affairs. Therefore, they must give up some sort of agency. Not only that, should they wish to, so for example, let's say they did choose, according to this, to opt to be stay-at-home mom. Why is that not going to work? It's because, first of all, they can't really leave that choice. They make a choice which they're not really aware of, and they're stuck in that choice forever. Why are they stuck in this choice? Because they can't divorce. Why can't they divorce? Because when they divorce, they have nothing to fall back on. They've been out of the workforce for more than 5 years, and almost no employer is willing to accept them back again. And here's the thing, we do see, for example, a false statistic that, for example, with many Catholic families in which divorce is prohibited, that the rates of divorce are much, much lower. However, we do believe that is a very false statistic, because it's not that they're not divorcing because, they're unhappy. They're not divorcing because they can't divorce. Why? Because they're pretty much shackled into the confines of a marriage. They simply, although the statistics show that the divorce rates are low, but there's not, when you examine upon close examination, they're not really happy. Second of all, in the workforce, that's been, so second thing, in the workforce, I mentioned how they can't go back to work, and we talk a lot about, for example, the extent of gender discrimination and so on and so forth, because they think that they're going to become a mother. Now, that's it for stay-at-home moms. I'll move on to working mothers. Now, when it comes to working mothers, they do not get the benefits of stay-at-home mom. Basically, they can't spend a significant amount of time raising their children. They can't see unfulfillment in that. And they can't, for example, influence the child's ideology as effectively. So the ideal case scenario, if there's a working mom, who's going to raise a family? You can either leave it to the nannies, or ideally, for example, we left to, for example, the families, and the aunties, the grandmas, and so on and so forth. So here's the thing: although that may be very fulfilling for those who do raise a child, that will not be the mother. Therefore, the mother cannot get fulfillment in raising these children. No, thank you. I'll take opening. Do you have anything? Seeing as there are none, I'll continue with my speech. The other kind of thing that we're trying to dismantle, that these made over here, is the whole idea of gender norms. This shows up in multiple ways. For example, because we have the prevalent narrative that motherhood is this such a great thing, that also implies that, oh hey, only a woman, only a mother can, for example, get such fulfillment. For example, if Musa and I were to have a baby together, that would be extremely impossible in the confines of society today, because the two of us, as men, I hope, will never be seen as appropriate child rearers for the family. And this is the kind of notion that we want to dismantle. We do prove the notion of stay-at-home dads. We do prove the notion of, for example, adoption, surrogate mothers. Yeah, they're saying, oh hey, it's biologically impossible, but you can always adopt. They never looked at that possibility. No, thank you. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, look for my substantive. Yeah, he also talked about how like in Japan there are many old ladies and there's like a really low population growth. Now the reason why that is so is because in Japan the cost of living is way too high. Cost of living is way too high that there is no other choice but for the women to work because a single parent alone cannot make enough money to feed his entire family. So it's really funny how they're talking about, oh hey, we're maximizing, we want women in Japan, for example, to go and work, but they're not really seeing the unintended consequences that will result as a result of these actions, which is basically the family's going to end up being bankrupt. And it's also really funny how he talks about freedom of choice when he talks about the benefits of families and how the families are good overall, like economically, blah, 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 and how like it's always best to have kids in the confines of marriage as opposed to like a simple boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. However, on their grounds, on the grounds of choice, we do believe that, for example, having boyfriend-girlfriend relationships are so much easier. Why? Because once you're in a marriage, you're kind of stuck down there for quite a long time. You don't really have the choice to break it up as easily as you could have. And if you're in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, that's much easier to cut off, no legal ties, no legal like loopholes for you to like get bogged down by. So therefore, in order to, once again, all these guys are there to talk about maximizing choice. However, the choice of the notion that motherhood is fulfilling is a false one. They don't know what they're signing up for, and they'll do a much better job. So now, what exactly is more fulfilling? We see trends. The trends these days, for example, the greater percentage of women, for example, are going to the workforce as CEOs, as innovators, as artists, etc., so on and so forth. And so these are the things which women seek fulfillment in, not anything else. And stay-at-home moms, once again, can't go back to the workforce. And once again, for all these reasons, we are very, very proud to oppose.